Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today, this video is part of a blog hop for Spellbinders. I am using the clear stamp and die of the month, but there's multiple kits for Spellbinders. If you are not aware, I would encourage you to go over and participate in the blog hop. There are prizes to be won, and who doesn't love a good prize? But also, if you're not familiar with their kits, basically you sign up for them. There's all different kinds of kits there. I tend to gravitate toward the ones with stamps because that's just what I prefer. But there's stamps, there's dies, there's glimmer kits. There's all kinds of stuff, and it's always a surprise. And I love a surprise in the mail. So yeah, super fun. So this one has this little color wheel and then some thread in there. They also have this little triangle where you can solid stamp your colors into the color wheel. I chose to color mine with Copics, and the reason that I did this is because I was trying to match the thread that I'm going to be using, because this super fun kit is also a stitching die. So you can use it both ways, which, as you know, I like to get more bang for my buck, so I'm all about that. So there's all of my colors laid out, and then here's all of the colors that I am going to be using in the floss. I, I guess, okay, we'll talk about the floss more when we get to the sewing part. So these are all matchy-matchy. I'm just going to go in and fill in all of these triangles. The reason that I chose to fill them in, you certainly don't have to, but I chose to do that because I liked that it made my card focal point look fuller. I love the stitched accent, but I do prefer it, me personally, I prefer it as an accent and not just the only thing that's going on there. So that is why I chose to fill in my background, but it's certainly not necessary. In this kit, they also have a organizer, a thread organizer. I stamped the one that had the thread already drawn on it, which is really more of a traditionally stamped image. But they do have just a blank one, as well as a number stamp, so that you could organize your own floss with this kit, which I think is super helpful. Back to the card real quick. So here you can totally tell the difference between a marker that needs to be re-inked and one that is full. So you can see my first three colors. I had no issue whatsoever filling those in completely solid. And then that YG03, which I use all of the time, is like a little bit questionable. Well, it's a little bit questionable because I need to re-ink it. I'm very aware I need to re-ink it. I wasn't super worried about it for this card because I am going to be stitching right over top of it, but you can totally tell that I need to re-ink that marker. So just, casualties of being a Copic colorist is sometimes, you fall behind on the filling of the markers. I'm pretty much always behind on it because that's just my life. So once these are all filled in, I'm going to use those same Copic markers to fill in the thread so that everything is super matchy-matchy. But first I'm going to color the organizer. I don't know if this is necessary, but because I do prefer a little bit more dimension, I felt like I just wanted to add in some shadows to that white and kind of make it pop off the page. Since I'm doing such a clean and simple card, little things like this can really add more interest to a clean and simple design. So just something to consider when you're making your cards. So with that said, I'm going to be filling in the thread, like I said, with all those matching same Copic markers. I definitely could have gone in there with the actual thread that I used and wrapped it around there, but I knew in my mind how I wanted to kind of do the card layout, and I just thought that it would be too bulky with the stitching that I was already going to do on the color wheel, but that is certainly something that is an option for you when you are creating your card. So, yeah, as far as life goes, it's been a crazy week in our household. Everybody has been sick. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. So the week before last, I had kind of like a sore throat thing going on. And that was really my only symptom. It lasted about 3 to 4 days, and I was extra tired. And then it just seemed to kind of move on. Well, then we took Miss Caitlin to her 6-month appointment. And can you believe it's been 6 months? I cannot. It's going by so fast. she had her 6-month appointment with her vaccinations the previous Thursday. And so that Sunday, which was Mother's Day, back to the card. So here, now that I have those all colored and I'm done with that, I'm going to start doing my die cutting. And I'm going to do the stitching portion of it first. I chose to use, in addition to the stitching portion of it, the die that also completely cuts out the color wheel, but you don't have to do that. You could stamp down your color wheel on your cardstock where you wanted it to be on your card front, and then use the stitching die and never have to cut it out. But I chose to because I wanted a little bit more dimension, because again, this is a very simple card design. So I have my 2 little sentiments I stamped. I'm going to die cut those out, as well as the organizer that I will be cutting out. So anywho, so Thursday she presented with a fever Thursday evening. She was a little bit like coughy, a little bit snotty, and she did have like a high fever for her. She hasn't really ever had one. And so we ended up calling the on-call, because even though I'm not a first-time mom, I am a very cautious mom. And with this being her first fever, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else I needed to be doing. Plus, I didn't know her dosage for the Tylenol in order to bring her fever down. So I needed to talk to somebody who knew what they were talking about that. And that's basically just what they told us. As long as she's still drinking and she's having wet diapers, you can give her X amount of Tylenol to bring her fever down. And then really, I mean, we gave her Tylenol before bed, and the next morning she was totally fine as far as her fever was concerned. She still was a little bit snotty and congested and had the cough. But I'm going to be real with y'all. She got sick at like February, and I feel like that child has had a cough ever since then. Okay. Back to the card. So now we're going to move on to the stitching portion. I know this is going to look weird. I typically separate my strands out. This time I chose to do 3 because I wanted them to be full. But what you'll see when I pull the strands out, I actually flip one of them the other way. This is an old trick from my cross-stitching days, because if you it's kind of like when you curl your hair, okay? If you curl your hair and you curl them all in the same direction, then they all lay right on top of each other. If you curl your hair and you curl them in 2 different directions, then it's much more full. It's the same idea with your floss or your thread. If you flip one of them the other way, they can't all sink into each other and lay on top of each other. It creates a much fluffier floss so that your stitches look fuller. So that is the way that I choose to do mine. I'm going to be straight up with y'all. I tape mine on I put it through, I tape mine in the back, and then when I'm done, I tape that tail as well, and if I need to trim any, I do. I didn't need to trim any here. Why didn't I need to trim any here? Because I cut them a smidge too short. So this first one works perfectly. And I don't have any issues getting all of my lines, all 3 of them. There's way more than 3, Kelly. All of my lines filled in. Now, I did have to, on the last one, not wrap it all the way around, but that wasn't a problem because you can't see it on the front. I'm going to tape that, and then I'm going to move on to the next color. With the next color, I was like, I already know that in order to make this work, here you'll see me doing the flippy thing again, because that's how I do it for all of them. Because I like fluffy floss. Who wants flat stitches? So when I do it with the orange, I was like, well, I know I'm going to need to just go right next to one of them. So I'm just going to get that out of the way in the beginning. And then by the time I got to the end, I did not have enough floss. And I was like, what the hey? Like, I literally laid them all out next to each other, and that is how I cut them. Because I thought that I had enough floss based on that first color. So right away out the gate, I do the ones that it's right next to each other. And then as I'm stitching, I realize that I'm going to run out of floss. You'll see me here trying to do like a little workaround to see if I can make it work. It doesn't work. So I just pulled them right back out. I just used my needle and pulled my stitches right back out. You don't want to pull too hard, obviously. You don't want to rip your paper, but the holes are big enough that really shouldn't be an issue. And then I'm going to try it the way that I did the first time, and guess what? It's still too short. So I end up, I'm not kidding, for every single color, I end up having to rethread my needle to stitch the very last one, and that's it. So from here on out, I assure you that's what I am doing, but I did cut it out of the video because I didn't think you needed to see me thread, rethread, stitch, restitch just for that one stitch. So I just removed it. Okay, back to my life story, because honestly, that's what most of all of you are here for. Though some of you are not, and some of you don't like story time, and that's fine. But this is what this is, and it's okay if you don't like story time. Mute it or move on to another channel. There's 1 million talented card makers out there who are making videos. I encourage you to check them out. Support all of the other crafters. So here in this one, like I said, showing you that I am just doing that last stitch, but after the orange, it will be removed, just to save time. So back to the card, or back to the story. That's the important part. So she was fine, a little bit snotty or whatever. But she's had this cough since February, so I didn't even think anything of it. Yes, we've taken her to the doctor multiple times. Every time they say her chest is clear, and it's just because her little nasal passages are so tiny. We run a humidifier. We've tried cough medicine. It just has to run its course, basically, is what we were told. So on Sunday night, it was been very warm here, but we haven't turned on the air conditioning yet. We had the windows open and the heat turned off. When we went to bed, we forgot to turn the heat back on. So on Monday, everybody kind of woke up with a sore throat because the temperature had dropped. It was cold overnight. What have you. Everybody kind of woke up with a sore throat, including Peanut. And he was like, my throat hurts. And I was like, okay, but like everybody kind of feels that way. Like I made him some hot tea. Is it getting better? Yes. And I was like, listen, I don't know how bad it is. You have to be honest with me. Like, do you think you want to go to school or no? And he was like, no, I'm going to go to school. Okay. No other symptoms at this point. Monday night, he's still complaining of a sore throat, and now he has a temperature of 102. So I'm like, oh, goodness. So I give him some cough and cold medicine that has Tylenol in it to bring his fever down. On Tuesday, when he gets up, he still has a fever, though it's not as high as it was the night before. And so I give him more, I keep him home from school, give him more cough and cold medicine. He's eating, he's drinking, he's just kind of laying around on the couch all day, which is what most of us do when we don't feel good. So then Wednesday, he went to his dad's, and he tells me that he's trying to get him in for a doctor's appointment. And I was like, okay, something changed. And he's like, well, I'm giving him Tylenol, but he still has a fever. So obviously that's some cause for concern if you're giving him Tylenol and his fever isn't coming down. So we go in there and talk to the doctor, and she was like, hey, is the Tylenol not bringing his fever down? And he's like, well, I gave him Tylenol before he went to bed last night, but then this morning he woke up with a fever, and I haven't given him anything else because I didn't want it to interact with anything you guys gave him. Well, they didn't give us anything because it's a viral, and they're not going to give us anything. He's just going to write it out. So he's pretty much home from school all week long. Today is Thursday, but I also called him off for tomorrow because if he goes to school and he still has a cough, then it's bad enough that they send him to the nurse. Then they're going to send him home, and we won't be able to send him back in without paperwork of a negative COVID test. Well, we don't have any paperwork. We did a COVID test, but it was just the at-home one, and his pediatrician was like, we're pretty much just trusting. Wow, Kelly. We're pretty much just trusting the at-home one, so if it came back negative, we're not going to do another one. So I have no paperwork to present, so it's just safer to keep him home. He'll go back to school on Monday. All right, so now we're to the building of the card. Like I said, I kind of already had the idea in my head of how I wanted to do it. I used the little Stitched with Love on the bottom portion of the organizer, and then the Together Like Needle and Thread in the center of it. Now, really what I'm doing here is I'm gluing them each to the organizer because I knew that I wanted to pop it up on foam, and this will make it easier for me if all of the pieces are together. So then I can just put the foam on the color wheel, Now, because of the thread, this is why I chose to adhere it with the foam. I didn't want there to be an issue with the bulk that the thread creates, with it adhering to the card. So I just cut some thin strips of foam tape. I put that all around the edges, and then I also put one in the center because I didn't want it to be unbalanced. But this did hold fairly well. If you were extra concerned about, like, you were mailing it a long way, you could probably also put some thin strips in between each one of the colors, but I didn't feel like it was necessary. Mostly because I don't mail my I don't mail my cards. So this is pretty sturdy though. Like, even now, it's whatever, 2 weeks later after I made the card and poking it, it's not going anywhere. Now that I have those on there, I'm just going to remove the backer and then adhere that down. And then I will add a small piece of foam tape to the bottom portion of the organizer. And then I will glue the rest. I was a little apprehensive about gluing it to the thread, but honestly, it really hasn't moved. There hasn't been an issue. So he's been homesick all week, and I didn't want them to send him home because of his cough. So I just figured it was better just to keep him at home in general. So that's just kind of been what our week has been. It's been a little bit kind of crazy. So I did call to get his schoolwork so we could at least get caught up on that. And then next weekend, if you can even believe it's already, is his birthday party. And so I haven't really had any time to do anything for that yet. And I had ordered his invitations so that he could invite a couple of his friends from school, but now he's been out of school all week. So, like, those poor parents are going to get an invitation with like 1 week notice. But I mean, it just kind of is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. So he did say that he told them like the week before last that he was inviting them to his birthday party. So there's that. So now that this is all together, just the last thing that I'm going to do, of course, is add some shimmers. And I chose to add that to the Copic colored portion just to give it a little bit of extra. But then that is it. That's the whole card. So I hope that you will check out the Spellbinders kits. I hope that you will check out the blog hop. There's lots of wonderful, talented designers and inspiration on there. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.